What is Ron Paul's strategy here? He hasn't won any states yet, but somehow he still thinks he's going to get the nomination. Tell us.
Well, that's right. He has not won any states. He's dead last in the delegate count. He has 47 delegates compared to over 400 for Mitt Romney. The magic number for delegates to clinch the nomination is 1,144. So it's very difficult. The math is almost impossible for Ron Paul, but his campaign knows that. And their strategy is essentially to get to the convention in Tampa this summer where no candidate, not even Mitt Romney, has the 1,144 delegates, creating a scenario where there is a brokered convention and a floor fight, and Ron Paul would prevail in that floor fight and become the nominee. So that's the strategy that they're looking at, is getting the nomination even without clinching by getting the required number of delegates.
And how does that work? I mean, if Mitt Romney comes into this convention well ahead, how does Ron Paul then, I mean, how does he instigate this floor fight?
Well, if there's a floor fight, everything is essentially up for grabs, and it's up to the delegates who are at the convention to decide. Well, one of Ron Paul's strengths has been organization. His people are very motivated. He's worked the caucus system in a way where he's putting Ron Paul supporters in a position to actually be at the convention and cast ballots. So they're thinking that their superior organizational skill and maneuvering will essentially be enough to put them over the top and win a floor fight and prevail in a brokered convention. It's not a conventional strategy by any means, and it's not something other candidates see as plausible, but this is what the Ron Paul folks are thinking through right now.
I mean, isn't even in that scenario, as you say, which is kind of unusual enough, isn't the fact that his ideas about foreign policy for the U.S. are so out of step with mainstream Republican thought? Wouldn't that, even in a brokered situation, mean that a lot of people who were at the convention wouldn't want him to be the Republican candidate?
Well, I think that's a really good argument, that his views, his aversion to foreign intervention are very much out of step with the Republican mainstream. But he can also point to data that help him. For example, in the Wall Street Journal NBC News poll, Ron Paul was only 8 points behind Barack Obama. Now, that's actually a better showing than Newt Gingrich or Rick Santorum were able to manage. Mitt Romney's showing against Barack Obama was a little better, but head-to-head, Ron Paul actually did pretty well, and he actually bested Obama when it comes to blue-collar voters and also men. So these are the kinds of arguments that the Ron Paul forces would make at a convention.
And Peter, we're looking at the upcoming contest right here. March 6th to 10th, we've got Wyoming. On March 10th, there's the Kansas caucus. And then on the 13th, we've got Alabama, Mississippi, and the Hawaii caucus. Does Ron Paul have any shot at any of those? Are those things that he's setting his sights on, or is his whole strategy looking to the GOP convention now?
Well, no. Ron Paul's going to continue to campaign. He is going to be sending surrogates to Hawaii to campaign. He'll be going to Missouri this weekend, his campaign says, to appear in town halls and make speeches. So he's not bowing out or giving up by any means. He's continuing to campaign. But just they understand the math, and they realize they're probably not going to get to 1,144 delegates. So they're starting to sort of game out these other scenarios where they get to a convention that's brokered, there's a floor fight, and they would prevail. But the Ron Paul strategy has always relied heavily on caucuses. They hope to out-organize, outmaneuver their opponents at these caucuses. And there are some caucuses coming up, but the cache of delegates involved is not nearly large enough for Ron Paul to overcome this deficit in delegates right now. So they need an alternative strategy, and that's what they're thinking through.
Also, if I read your reporting correctly, too, that one of the goals might be to get some of his ideas, again, which are about the Federal Reserve, for instance, into a Republican plank or a policy as the general election goes on. Is that plausible? Again, could we see the GOP adopt, a plank that is very restrictive about Federal Reserve monetary policy?
Well, that's right. That is an aim, and they are hoping to influence the party platform. And this is the Ron Paul campaign. It's a campaign in one sense, but a movement in another. And they want their ideas on the Federal Reserve. They want their ideas on foreign entanglements, foreign policy, to become more influential within the Republican conversation. And the hope is that by virtue of having enough delegates, by mustering enough delegates and bringing them to the convention, they can essentially force the party in this direction. So they wouldn't do it out of any great, maybe, fealty towards Ron Paul, but by virtue of the influence that Ron Paul commands because of his delegates, he hopes he can shift the conversation in this direction.